The passenger I picked up at 3 in the morning had vanished by the time we reached the destination. Only wet footprints remained on the seat. Murakami was a veteran taxi driver with 15 years of experience. He knew exactly when to cruise for the highest fares late at night. One winter night, at 3 a.m., a figure on a bridge waved him down. It was a young woman in a white dress. "Where to?" he asked. She gave him an address by the sea. Murakami noticed something was off. Her clothes were far too thin for deep winter. In the rearview mirror, her eyes were hollow. "Aren't you cold?" he called back. No answer. He arrived at the destination and turned around. The back seat was empty. But on the seat, wet footprints remained. Murakami told a colleague. The colleague went pale. "A woman jumped off that bridge 6 months ago. She was wearing a white dress." The next day, Murakami went to check on the seaside address. It was a vacant lot. But in the corner of the lot, a small bouquet of flowers had been placed. Attached to the bouquet was a photograph of a woman. It was the face of last night's passenger. The inscription read, "Age 23 at the time of death." In life, the woman had lived in that vacant lot. Her old apartment once stood there. Perhaps she is trying, every night, to return to her old home from the bridge. Murakami stopped picking up fares from bridges after dark. But even now, late at night, a figure on that bridge can sometimes be seen. A woman in a white dress, arm raised, waiting. There is no way of knowing who a passenger is until you arrive at the destination. The reason this story is never resolved is that the woman still cannot go home. The bridge figure appears night after night, still. If you drive past that bridge at night and see a hand raised for a taxi, do not stop. Stop, and you become part of this story. The next story involves a deeply unsettling encounter at a late-night convenience store. The woman standing at the register was a former coworker I recognized immediately. She had died last year. Shimizu worked the night shift at a convenience store. Between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., he knew almost every regular customer. One night, as Shimizu stood at the register, a familiar face came through the door. It was Asami, a former coworker who had transferred away 6 months ago. "Asami, long time no see," he said. Asami picked up a can of coffee and brought it to the register. But Shimizu noticed, she was wearing the same clothes every time. Every Wednesday night, Asami would appear in the same outfit and buy the same coffee. Shimizu mentioned it to his manager. The manager's face fell. "Asami, she passed away last year, a traffic accident." Shimizu couldn't believe it. He had spoken to her, seen her face, every week. The next Wednesday, Shimizu waited. At 2 a.m., Asami came in, same outfit, as always. "Asami, you're..." Shimizu started. Asami looked at Shimizu and smiled. "Oh, Shimizu, so you work here. I didn't know that." Shimizu worked up the courage to ask, "Asami, are you doing okay?" Asami smiled with a faint trace of sadness and took her coffee. "I always liked this coffee here," she said. She turned and headed for the exit. Shimizu tried to follow, but his legs wouldn't move. The door chimed open, and Asami's figure vanished. But the automatic door sensor showed no one had passed through. The purchase was recorded on the register. Yet the security camera showed only Shimizu in the store, alone. Asami kept coming every Wednesday. Shimizu stopped trying to speak to her. He would quietly bag her favorite coffee and hand it to her. It was the only thing he could do for her. Next, a man is trapped on a train that stops for no one, and no driver. I had boarded the last train, yet an hour later, we were still passing the same station again and again. Salary worker Tanaka just barely caught the last train after working overtime. The loop line makes one complete circuit every hour. Even if you miss your stop, riding one full loop brings you back. Tanaka dozed off from exhaustion and woke to the train still moving. Outside the window, he recognized a familiar station passing by. Done another lap, he thought, preparing to get off at the next stop. But the doors would not open. No passengers boarded or alighted. The train just kept going. Tanaka looked around the car. Every other passenger was asleep. He tried to shake them awake. No one stirred. The same station passed again. He had counted 3 laps now. His phone had no signal. The clock was frozen at 3 a.m. Tanaka walked toward the driver's cab. Through the small window of the partition, he looked into the driver's seat. The driver's seat was empty. Yet the train ran precisely along the loop, perfectly on schedule. Tanaka yelled for help, but his voice was swallowed by the train's noise. After losing count of the laps, someone sat down beside Tanaka. A station employee in uniform. "Surprising, isn't it, that you can't get off?" the employee said. "This is the train for people who have lost somewhere to go. Those with nowhere to return to sleep here, endlessly." Tanaka shouted, "I have a home, I can go back." The employee smiled. "Really? Then think, what happened today?" Tanaka remembered. That day, his wife had told him she wanted a divorce. That he had no one waiting at home. The doors of the next station opened. Tanaka leapt off. The platform was his own neighborhood station. He looked back as the train disappeared into the dark. Those riders are still looping, endlessly. The morning my reflection disappeared from the mirror, I began to question whether this world was real. Sato, living alone in an apartment, noticed something odd on his very first day. Sometimes, no reflection appeared in the bathroom mirror. He assumed it was a trick of the light at first. But every morning, for just a moment, the mirror went blank. One morning, the blank moment lasted longer. For a full 10 seconds, Sato's reflection was gone. But the room was still reflected in the mirror, his room, exactly as it was. In that reflected room, there was someone else. A figure stood in the corner of the reflected room. Sato looked around his actual room. No one was there. Only in the mirror was the figure visible. Gradually, the figure began to move closer in the mirror. Every morning, slightly, inexorably closer. Sato called the building management and asked if anything had happened in this apartment. The previous tenant went missing, they told him. A roommate reported seeing the tenant vanish while looking in that mirror. Sato decided to move out immediately. On his final night, he covered the mirror with a cloth. While packing the next morning, he accidentally pulled the cloth off. The figure in the mirror was now standing right at the glass. Close enough to touch. And the figure slowly began pushing against the mirror from inside. The mirror's surface distorted like glass under pressure, a tear forming. Sato fled the apartment. He never returned. But in the new apartment he moved into, he sometimes notices something. A small figure in the corner of any mirror. Perhaps whatever was in that mirror followed him home. The final story reveals the truth behind a cursed video that was never meant to be played. The moment I pressed play, a hand reached out from the screen toward me. A young man named Yosuke bought an old VCR at a flea market app, and found a tape inside. Out of curiosity, he rewound and played it. The footage was old. After a burst of static, a dark room appeared. In the room, a figure was seated with its back to the camera. The figure began slowly turning around. But the footage stopped there and turned to static again. That's it. Yosuke was disappointed. But from that night on, Yosuke started receiving phone calls. Unknown caller, and when he answered, only static. 3 days later, Yosuke had a dream. He was in a dark room, seated with his back to an unseen camera. Now it was his turn to turn around. He woke up. The television had turned itself on. The screen showed static, and something was moving within it. Yosuke reached for the remote to turn it off. The remote didn't respond. He tried the power button directly on the TV. It stayed on. The figure in the static was drawing closer to the screen. It began pressing against the screen from inside. The screen bulged. Yosuke yanked the power cord from the wall. The TV went dark. Relieved, Yosuke noticed something on the black screen. A handprint pressed from the inside of the dark screen. A handprint on the interior surface of the glass. Yosuke threw away the VCR and disposed of the TV. But even on his new television, the static appears, and a figure moves inside. The unknown caller with static still comes through on his phone. Yosuke is left with one lingering question. In that original tape, he never saw what the figure looked like when it turned around. If he had watched to the end, what would have happened? Yosuke is alive, but whatever is in the static is still pursuing him.